Hi, I'm Danielle Hartman, and welcome to another episode of Poured in PA. Breweries have always been about more than just beer, serving as community gathering places and sources of local identity and pride. But they can also help to revitalize once flourishing communities. In this episode, we'll shine the spotlight on entrepreneurs who saw potential and breathed new life into their towns by opening a brewery.
We were welcomed pretty much immediately. This was a pretty wild idea to do in a town like this in 2006. Now every town this size has a brewery, but at that time, I think I was called insane a couple of times.
You know what, I sat in an office for about 17, 18 years and had some time to do a lot of research on things and realized that a lot of brewers were popping up in the area, and all of a sudden realized like, hey, you know what, maybe in a small town of Hamburg, maybe I can open up just a real small place on the weekends and make things work.
So we're in pretty much the geographic center of Pennsylvania, the town of Millheim, which has boomed to a population of 900, up from 770 when I got here 30 years ago. A little before I got here, there were 2 department stores. The hardware was still across the street. It was very much the economic hub. And then things turned like it did in a lot of small towns all over the state. And it was looking pretty rough when we decided to throw down and do this.
Born and raised in Hamburg, never left Hamburg. You know, when I was younger, Hamburg was a pretty flourishing town. You know, we had a lot of sandwich shops, a lot of pizza shops. We had a battery factory, we had steel foundries, things like that. And during the 80s, you know, walking around town, you know, a little kid riding my bike up to the pool, saw a lot of businesses close, you know, and so always thought that I wanted to stay in Hamburg and do something for the town because I believe, you know, growing up, the organizations that were in town gave a lot to the kids in the area, and I just wanted to try to do something to give back.
Johnstown kind of has this, I don't want to call it a cloud hanging over our head. Everybody refers to us as the flood city. We've had more than a few floods. Several of them have been rather devastating. We're situated kind of in the draw of several different mountain ranges, and all the rivers kind of funnel right into downtown. Johnstown, was huge steel industry, and obviously that, kind of just evaporated, decades ago, leaving Johnstown, with a mass exodus of people. We're moving out of town because there was no jobs. The economy started to collapse and crumble, and then you started seeing property values decrease so much when everybody vacates. Owners can't even sell their buildings, so they just leave and go. So we were lucky enough to find our building actually on a sheriff's auction for taxes.
We found Braddock in 2012 for our location. It's an old electrical supply store that we're in right now that we renovated over the course of a year or so and opened our doors in May of 2014. For those who don't know about Braddock, it's this really interesting, small, historic town. It started from early on with, being a battlefield during the French-Indian War to kind of the heartbeat of the city of Pittsburgh during the Industrial Revolution. Right up the street, the Edgar Thomson Works is Andrew Carnegie's steel mill, and it's still functioning today. It's got this quiet hum of constant manufacturing and production, and it really set the stage of Braddock being this kind of hub of manufacturing and economic activity. Kind of in its heyday, if you couldn't find it in Braddock, you didn't need it, is what they would say. And the streets would be bustling constantly. There was a ton of retail, and its backbone always still existed because it had these deep manufacturing roots with kind of the steel industry. What some might see as buildings falling down and a town that got the rug pulled out from under it, we saw as an opportunity to help rebuild a community, especially in the 21st century, of just, a lot of these towns across America. How do we keep the history and the bones of what existed and rebuild it and not leave the community behind in doing so?
Penns Valley is a little bit of a different kettle of fish. There's kind of a mixture of Lancaster Amish, old Backton-landers, hippies, and people who have been here for 10 generations. There's just a different sensibility here than I've worked all over rural Pennsylvania most of my life, and I've never seen anything quite like this. The creativity. I just felt like if it could work anywhere in a small town, it could work here. I wouldn't have tried this on the other side of Center County. There's just something about this place that gave me confidence that it had a prayer.
1787 is the year that Hamburg was founded. This actually was a 5 and 10 store for many, many years. Generations passed it down, different owners, but it always stayed 5 and 10, which was pretty popular in town. Most of the stuff that you'll see on the walls was actually found in the attic. It's not really decked out with pictures and everything like that in the wall. It's very plain, simple, but you know, they come for the beer and food, so.
It's actually about a half a mile down the street from us. There's this big old stone bridge, kind of its claim to fame, if you want to call it that, in the 1889 flood, as the flood waters rushed through and basically wiped out the entire, where we are now, downtown complex of Johnstown. It basically just flushed everything down to that bridge, and it all kind of got blocked up there and created a giant dam, and then caught on fire a day later. And so, you know, it was kind of part of that grotesque story of development gone wrong in the industrial age. But the bridge still stands. And now today, you know, locally, we kind of look at it as part of this atrocious saga of Johnstown. You know, so many people that died there. We wanted to bring it back to life and highlight it. And so we took our name from that as, you know, kind of being the significant little piece of our history.
Braddock was a really quiet town. When we actually were getting our licenses, you had to get a brew pub license and a brewery license. It wasn't until the year after we had opened that you could just have a tap room. And so we kind of creatively got around a lot of laws early on, I would say, to be able to kind of focus on the taproom model, which was direct to consumer in the taproom, having them come down, buy beer over the counter, fill growlers, have pints on site. Yeah, I mean, before that, you couldn't sell pints on site the way that we did unless you were serving food. We were, again, very early to kind of the food truck model. I think we were the first brewery in Pittsburgh to have like a set schedule of food trucks in town, and it's been really cool to see kind of the evolution of the entire model as, you know, new breweries have opened and, you know, people riff off of each other's ideas and kind of you grow this kind of new thing, which is the brewery tap room. And that's kind of become a staple that we see not only, you know, here in Pittsburgh in the state of Pennsylvania, but nationally.
We are the first brewery to be open in Johnstown since the closing of Johnstown Brewing Company about 15 years ago or so. So I moved here in the early 90s, and we opened our first restaurant here in 2013. And craft beer was kind of an unknown beast in this town. You know, Johnstown's got a history of loving beer, but loving the, you know, typical kind of light American lager sort of stuff. At one point, Johnstown had something like 13 breweries in kind of the post-Prohibition era. You know, we opened a restaurant originally. Our focus was really on educating the clientele to what craft beer is, and it helped us out when we got to the point of opening the brewery a couple years ago here, where we had a nice little market of people here that understood craft beer. We're starting to develop a pretty decent draw around town here, and it doesn't hurt that we bring in a lot of people from out of town, especially in the summertime with all the recreation here.
We were very committed, and still are, but committed right out of the gate to buying as much local farm product as we could. Our menu, we've had a couple different chefs who've excelled at working with those kind of fresh ingredients. So that might have been even bigger learning curve than some of the beers. Our brewer, Tim Yarrington's been with us since day one, still the head of brewing operations, and he's very much a traditional brewer, so our beers tended more towards English and German, which may not have been as big a learning curve for folks, particularly in this area. I've been shocked at how fast the IPA thing has gone off in our demographic. I mean, I've been a hophead for a long time, but I never saw that one coming.
Very early on, we made the decision that we wanted to focus on soft and balanced beers, and I think a lot of that stemmed from just the beers we enjoy drinking. You know, you hear brewers say this all the time. We make what we want to drink, But we really saw a need to, have a nod to the classics. So we do a lot of the, lagers and classic English styles, but also our portfolio is very heavily hop forward and we were very early to making kind of what has become known as the hazy or New England style IPA. Our flagship General Braddock's is kind of the epitome of our brewing philosophy, which is soft and balanced.
Our beers are the starting point for a lot of new customers here. So we do pale ale, we do a light lager. So in Johnstown, there's always that fella that's going to walk in and say, "I only drink icy light. What do you have that's close to that?" So we do a little bit of everything. Of course, we love our IPAs. Our flagship is the Hazy River IPA.
Believe it or not, our blonde ale is our most popular seller. That and our New England. They're always 1 and 2 every week. I'm an IPA guy, but I know that not everybody is an IPA person. So what we try to do for this area is just try to basically brew all classic styles. We try to keep our regular flagships on, we'll always have a stout on, we'll always have an IPA or blonde ale, but try to not get too crazy with things and just try to brew good classic styles that people could drink. We opened up in May of 2018. Right before we opened, there was a winery up the street. They have another location. They went in, we opened up. There's another winery in town. Barbershop, 2 actually barbershops just opened up. So I do believe it's coming back a little bit. I mean, it seems like a good place to be in a Friday, Saturday night.
I think there's been I don't want to say flurry of activity because it's taken 10, 12 years, but there's an art gallery across the street. The hardware's still right up the road. They took over a small grocery store up the street. And likewise, a little grocery store that was across the street moved out and built a bigger place just outside of town too. So we still have independently owned grocery store and hardware store right here in Millheim. A couple other things have come and gone in the meanwhile. It's still tough. It's still half an hour from anywhere. But a lot of people come through this town for various reasons between Penn State and Woodward Camp, and we bring a lot of folks to town that wouldn't come otherwise and try to share that with the other businesses to the degree that we can.
Our company has always been a balance between retail and manufacturing, and I think kind of where Braddock is today is it is a home to new creators who are focusing on manufacturing. Retail will be the last to come back, but we're slowly starting to see the avenue develop. And our tap room has been on the avenue since we've opened, but behind is our manufacturing facility, and that's, I think, Braddock will continue to attract those who, and continue to be full of people who are working in manufacturing and building and making things, and eventually we'll see the avenue redevelop based on that.
Over the last 5 or 8 years, we've really been focused on redeveloping the image of Johnstown, bringing it back to life, putting an emphasis on arts and entertainment and dining and recreation, and getting Johnstown away from the still town, flood city kind of cloud that hangs over us, and start to show people that what we have here is an absolutely beautiful playground. It's starting to come back to life very nicely.
People like beer and people like good food. And our intent was to help bring Main Street back. That was in our vision statement, our so-called business plan. Very explicitly, we wanted to do what we could to bring it back, not to what it was, but I realized at one point, this was more than just being a brewery. It was a community gathering. It's going to be a community gathering space. We wanted to do live music, local food and support the local farm economy, beer. I mean, those are all things you need in a good community gathering place. I like to think we've done something to certainly support farmers and the hardware and the grocery store, keeping our money as local as possible. I think it's a little different story maybe in some of the more urban examples of where this has happened, where as they succeed, people start building art galleries and coffee shops and little hotels adjacent to it, which only makes sense. We haven't seen quite that same kind of boom here, but it certainly, Main Street looks a hell of a lot different than it did 20 years ago.
It's unbelievable to see in front of your eyes as you're living it how things can change. I honestly believe we're on the leading edge of seeing where that's going to go. And now we have, Voodoo Brewing coming to town and building a spot, and we're starting to see more interest from outside entities saying, hey, Johnstown's got something going on they've been talking the revitalization game for a long time, and now we're starting to see the plays happen. And then that's largely happening because of small entrepreneurs, of a restaurant here and a bookstore there and a coffee shop there and a brewery here. And we all kind of are working together from the ground up to rebuild our town. And it's beautiful to see it all kind of start to happen now.
Thanks for watching. For more information on the breweries featured in this episode and the impact they've made on their communities, visit their websites. Until next time. Cheers.